What should I do now that Mom has covertly changed my wedding cake order and is unaware that I discovered it? Original post date September 26, 2023. My fiancé and I will marry this autumn, and the cake has been a major source of disagreement with my mother. Long story short, we preferred a dessert bar or cheesecake over a traditional cake. My mother first insisted on having at least a modest cake for just us to cut. We compromised and obtained quotes. Just before we put down a deposit, she felt that having just a cake for us and no visitors is tacky, so we needed to order a sheet cake to serve as well. We were annoyed because she was the one who suggested it, so we cut our losses and went with tiered and small cheesecakes, as we had initially planned. My mother would not let this go for the previous 6 months. She then chose to focus on requesting a groom's cake. My fiancé didn't want one. When I told her about it, she stated it's just a groom's cake in name and has nothing to do with his preferences. I told her a firm no several times because she refused to give up. Which takes us to this week. I received a text yesterday stating that she was at the bakery and had paid for the order. I became suspicious because I never mentioned her in those communications. I called the bakery today and was told by a very sorry employee that my mother had added a multi-tiered groom's cake with various fillings, flowers, and the works. We still have cheesecake, but I think it will look stupid next to what is basically a wedding cake. My question now is, what should I do? She is unaware that I know. I'm infuriated and hurt. Obviously, it's just a cake, but that's not exactly the point right now. She went behind my back and breached many boundaries after I said no. Am I being a bridezilla by not allowing her to have her conventional wedding cake? Relevant comment. Comment 1. Why should she have cake at your wedding? If you don't want cake, simply modify the order back and call it a day, and set a password for any future vendors so that changes cannot be made without it. Oop. Everyone I've spoken to has either agreed that they're paying for the wedding, or that it's not her wedding, not her cake. That is why I am split. Because they are paying. But they're rearranging the sequence behind my back. I'm probably more upset about the breach of trust than the cake itself. Comment 2. It's more than just a cake, it's a violation of your boundaries and wishes. Cancel her order and set a password on all of your wedding accounts. You don't marry her, you marry your spouse. Oop, exactly. The breach of confidence has been the most upsetting. I'll call back tomorrow to see if we can cancel and obtain a refund, because she paid in full. I suppose she did it on purpose, thinking she was being clever. Comment 3. Request that the bakery change the cake into additional cheesecake and tiny cheesecakes. Maybe a smaller groom's cake that doesn't look like a wedding cake. Don't tell her you did this. When you go to the bakery, have a password placed on the order, so that it cannot be modified after you have made the necessary alterations. She believes she has gotten one over on you. If she checks on it, the password will prevent her from making any further modifications. If she arrives at the venue with yet another cake, order the staff to store it in the back and not bring it out. Oop, thank you for the advice. Changing the cake to additional cheesecakes is a wonderful idea. I never expected to have to become a Redditor and password secure my wedding, yet here we are. Update December 30th, 2023, 3 months later. Hello again. Thank you to everyone who offered suggestions on my first post. I'm now married and had the finest, most relaxed honeymoon with my new husband, with no pesky family members harassing us. By the time I posted, it was too late to cancel the wedding due to deposits and contracts, so it went on as planned. To clarify, yes, my parents paid for the wedding, but my husband and I made it clear multiple times that we did not expect or require them to pay for everything. No, I do not think I should make excuses for my mother's actions. My parents underlined that it was our wedding and we could do whatever we wanted. The cake was clearly an exception to this. She had earlier stated that we could order cheesecake if that was what we wanted. My husband and I laughed at everyone's suggestions for handling the cake. Initially, I planned to surprise my mother by calling the bakery and requesting that the cake design be changed to something garish that reflected my husband's hobbies. For example, a groom's cake. After weighing my alternatives for a few days, I realized my drive for petty satisfaction would destroy my relationship with my mother, which had never been this dynamic prior to wedding planning. I knew she was in the wrong and behaved like a child. And even though I am the child in the relationship, I wanted to be mature and treat things like an adult, if only to maintain my moral high ground. I spoke with my parents and explained why this incident, and others throughout the wedding preparation process, were unpleasant and absolutely inappropriate. It did not go well. My mother sent me a series of texts that indicated her inability to accept responsibility or understand that I was not furious because she wrecked my wedding by purchasing a cake, but rather because she went behind my back knowing it would surprise and upset me on my wedding day. I tried several times to divert to the actual problem without much result. We closed the chat with her apologizing for the cake that had made my husband and me so unhappy. This was clearly not a real apology, or the major issue. Even if she believed it was, she also agreed to relocate the groom's cake to a lunch the day before the wedding, which I approved of. We were a week away from the wedding, and the prospect of continuing to press the matter was too much for me to take with everything else on my plate. I let go of the rope leading up to the wedding so that I could refocus on having the finest wedding possible. I tried to avoid interacting with my mother on the big day, and our wedding party and coordinator did an excellent job of acting as a barrier. While I've had some communication with her subsequently, it's been significantly reduced so I can gain some much-needed space. Obviously, we'll have some difficult conversations, but I'm going to prioritize spending time with my new husband and returning to treatment. Weddings, man. They truly bring out the craziness in people. Oh, and the cheesecakes were a big hit too. Relevant comments. Mrs. Neville Bartos. I'm delighted you got the day you wanted and enjoyed your honeymoon. Unfortunately, despite the fact that this was not previously the dynamic you had with your mother, she refused to acknowledge her wrong and did not apologize. If I were you, I would keep that in mind for future significant occasions, children, and so on, and plan accordingly. Oh sure. I brought up the issue of not following boundaries and destroying trust for future life events throughout our talk. She didn't appear to understand what I was saying and kept focusing on the cake, rather than the larger issue. 1 year update, November 3rd, 2024. I'm back with a 1 year update on how my mother changed my wedding cake order without my knowledge. People have asked for an update. And I've had numerous friends get engaged who have similar family dynamics to mine. I've already told them everything, but I feel compelled to publish it online as well. Now that I've been married for a year, I realize how much I adore my spouse and our life together, but having a traditional wedding was a huge mistake. When I reflect on our wedding day, I am devastated to realize that the few emotions I remember were not how much I love my now husband and my excitement for our future together. But I was worried about my mother and whether things were going to blow up. If you're recently engaged, have tough family ties, or aren't fully sold on spending a lot of money on a wedding, please consider this yet another loud voice yelling at you. Elope or have a courtroom wedding. Don't bring difficult guests, do whatever you want, but please avoid family turmoil at all costs. I wish I had stayed true to my original plan of eloping abroad. But alas, I made a decision and must accept it. What I failed to say in my earlier posts was that my relationship with my mother deteriorated immediately and irreversibly as soon as I became engaged. Even while I knew she could be a lot, I had no idea what I was getting myself into. If I could go back in time, I would have stopped the wedding planning train as soon as the first hints of madness appeared. The cake was, predictably, the final straw in the madness that occurred. Greatest hits include telling literally, and I mean literally, everyone she knew about our engagement. Less than 10 minutes after my husband told my parents he planned to propose, he shared the proposal photos with her, commenting on how big I looked in the photos, which are still ruined for me, and told a family member, who commented on how beautiful I looked at a pre-wedding event, yeah, she's gained a lot of weight. On the day of my wedding, she attempted to crash my first look and seemed to be offended that she had been excluded. She crashed my first look and threw a tantrum because my wedding organizer wouldn't let her in. Made the wedding all about how she never had a say in anything, and that I was the controlling immature one. We still have communication now, but it's limited and I'm very cautious about what I choose to reveal. She never sincerely apologized or acknowledged the stress and hurt she caused. I don't see that occurring until she makes some substantial adjustments, so. The moral of the story is to fully enjoy the new excitement of being engaged. But honestly, consider whether somebody in your life will make wedding planning misery on earth. If you're fortunate enough to have such a character, make a plan for dealing with it, and be prepared to enforce those boundaries. And for the truly weird families out there, perhaps just elope. Additional information from Oop. I understand how the language was deceptive, and I should have linked to the 2 previous posts. The goal of this was primarily to act as a cautionary story for any engaged couples out there who are in a similar circumstance. Learn from my mistakes. If you don't address minor grievances, drama can swiftly escalate and permanently damage relationships. Oop. Regarding how to handle family issues during wedding planning. Okay, fair enough. I've recently seen so many couples who are experiencing problems with their families early in the wedding planning process, so I wanted to express how, a year later, my family connections are strained as a result of one day, and it wasn't worth it for me. Yes, I regret not dealing with it earlier and recognizing the red signals. Hindsight is 20/20, and reality can be more nuanced than what seems on paper. Let us now go on to the second story. I was uninvited to a wedding and left humiliated in the rain, while my partner attended. Am I overreacting? Original post. Today my 24-year-old partner and I, let's call him Eric, were invited to the wedding of one of his oldest schoolmates. We received our save-the-date invitation months ago, and it was addressed to Eric and Vicky. Our invitation said that we were invited for the whole shebang, including the service, breakfast, and evening celebration. Our RSVP requested both of our dietary preferences for the breakfast, which we responded to years ago. I felt this was a fantastic and generous present from the bride and groom, especially because I had never met either of them and Eric was only close to the bride. The wedding is a few hours away from where we live, and as neither of us drives, I bought train tickets in advance for roughly PS60 each trip, as well as an Airbnb. It came out to £90 between us. We don't make much money, so this is a significant expense to justify yet. As they had invited us to the entire wedding, we felt it would be impolite not to attend. The bride also stated the colors we should wear, so I purchased a new gown because I did not have anything formal that would be appropriate. Not the end of the world, but with Christmas coming up, it was a little challenging and I had to be quite frugal throughout November to make it work. The total amount spent was roughly double what I would spend on fun things like going out to eat, drinking, or buying new clothes. We arrived at the service, which was stunning, with a lovely bride and a very emotional atmosphere. I get nervous at weddings for no apparent reason, so I didn't eat anything beforehand, believing the 4-course breakfast would enough. After the ceremony, we headed straight to the venue to drink and sit at tables. We were near the back of the queue entering the venue, so half of the congregation had already sat down. We looked at the seating plan, spotted Eric's name, and went over. There were no place settings for me. Eric found his name, but there were no available seats at the table. Eric sat down, and I asked an usher whether there was a mistake. He wasn't sure, so he waved over the bride. She and I had never met before, but she appeared nice. Until she opened her mouth. "Oh no, you won't be attending the breakfast. The invitation was only for the reception and service. You are welcome to come back later." This was in front of the majority of the visitors who had already sat down, in a large space with approximately 140 chairs. The usher suggested that I go to the pub. Eric didn't know what to do and didn't want to cause a disturbance, so he stayed still and quiet. I've never felt so embarrassed and humiliated in my life. When I departed, it was raining fiercely. I didn't bring an umbrella because it was an indoor wedding. And because I was in a rural area, I had to walk for roughly 20 minutes to get somewhere else. The usher had indicated a pub where the other guests were, so I kept walking, but my shoes were completely damaged and drenched through. It was also really cold because it was December and I was dressed for a wedding. I arrived at the bar to discover a group of merrymakers drinking excessively at 2 p.m., dressed in wedding attire. I addressed myself nervously because they were complete strangers, and they were thankfully very friendly. They encouraged me to sit with them and informed them about the service. Everyone had simply been invited to the reception. I requested one of them to show me their invitation, and it was evident that they were evening guests. There was no mention of the service, the breakfast, or their dietary needs. I appear to be the only individual who was both invited and then denied admission to the entire event. I sat with them and ate some food because I was starving, but about 4 p.m., they all left to get ready. As a complete stranger, I didn't think it was a good idea to ask to accompany them. But I had never been to this town before and, aside from Eric, knew no one. Since I was removed around 1:30 p.m., I was expected to hang out until 7:30 p.m., when the reception began. So I left. I felt so unloved and undesired that I just wanted to return home. The evening will begin in approximately half an hour without me, but I can't bring myself to go knowing that half of the guests witnessed me being asked to leave by the bride. I traded in my train ticket, which was for tomorrow, and now I'm traveling back alone. I texted Eric and told him, but he did not respond. I have been holding back tears since I was evicted 6 hours ago, and I am absolutely devastated. I'm not sure what happened with the invitation, whether it was a mistake or if I was simply supposed to know that it was only for Eric, despite being addressed to both, asking for both of our dietary restrictions, and expressly stating that we were invited to the entire wedding. A part of me wishes I had attended the nighttime reception as well, but I'm completely saturated. My hair and makeup look terrible. My shoes aren't wearable. I am currently barefoot on a filthy floor, and I am chilly. I look a mess and feel incredibly dumb. Did I make a mistake here? I feel like I've been completely fucked over, and I'm quite furious that Eric didn't stick up for me, say anything, or leave the meal with me. However, I believe this is due less to malice and more to his inability to perform under pressure. I've never heard of a wedding where you invite a +1 by name but don't invite them to as much of the festivities as the other half of the pair. Nobody else at the wedding experienced this. I don't understand how it can be personal since I've never met any of them before. I'm very disturbed, and I can't believe how strange today has been. If this happened to you, what would you do? TLDR, I went to a wedding and was uninvited halfway through. Am I overreacting to being hurt? Edit. So this blew up far more than I anticipated. Thank you for your words of encouragement, they've truly helped. And I've gone from a wobbling wet mess to a cackling harpy with my huge glass of wine. You guys aren't afraid to express your thoughts, which I enjoy. It's nearly bedtime here. Eric stayed at the party and is probably still there. I came home feeling much better knowing how bad the situation was. Karma is a bitch, and when they get low, we get high. So I'm going to go to bed, sleep on it, and plan my next moves in the morning. Many people believe I should dump Eric, but I have never considered doing so. I was mostly upset with the bride and the Mo, who may have also been involved. I'm not sure. Eric will be home sometime tomorrow, and we'll chat. I want to hear his piece because he's been drinking since midday. He could simply be a dumbass rather than a full-fledged arsehole. In any case, there will be no abrupt decisions made right now. I'll try to return and provide updates as things go. Thank you, everyone, for your 3 relevant remarks. To be honest, the bride, which is a word I don't use, and Eric, who is horrible, were the ones who messed up. I can't believe he didn't walk out with you. What the hell was he thinking? Did he previously date the bride or her sister? Oopie. It's funny you mention that. His ex serves as the maid of honor. We had no idea she would be attending the ceremony until we read her name in the wedding booklet. However, there is a lot of bad blood between them. If she was going to intercede and remove anyone, it would have been him. Update. Basically, I went to my boyfriend's oldest school friend's wedding and was kicked out of the wedding breakfast just as it began. My lover stayed for the wedding. I was surprised by the response to my first post, and I'd want to thank everyone who offered advice and encouragement. I was feeling so bad when I first posted, but after an hour of sipping wine and reading your responses, I felt a lot more sane and peaceful. I wanted to explain a few points that people were confused about or that were unclear in my last post. I live in the United Kingdom, and weddings here differ from those in the United States. Traditionally, there is a ceremony, a wedding breakfast, which is a sit-down 3-course meal served in the afternoon despite the name, speeches and an evening reception that resembles a disco. It is not uncommon for people to invite only relatives and close friends to the ceremony and breakfast, followed by a large number of guests for the reception in the evening. However, it is uncommon to invite someone to the ceremony and reception but not the breakfast because they will be left to entertain themselves for 6 hours. After speaking with friends and coworkers since last weekend, I realized that what occurred to me was a major etiquette violation. Eric and I have been dating for about a year and a half, live together, and have a strong relationship. He had no previous romantic relationships with the bride, whom I'll refer to as Marie. They attended school together from the ages of 4 and 10, and have remained in touch as pen pals and Facebook buddies since then. They rarely see each other in person, and the wedding marked the first time he had seen her in nearly 2 years. There was no phone signal at the location. We saw this when we arrived for the ceremony, and were a little unhappy because the wedding had a hashtag that we couldn't really tweet about with no signal. This is crucial later. We didn't realize it until we were at the wedding, but the maid of honor, Helen, was Eric's ex-girlfriend. They were together for 3 years until she cheated and dumped him. They have bad blood and avoid one another. Okay, on to the update. After the ceremony, I immediately boarded the train and returned to my hometown. I was riding the train when I penned my first post. When I came home, I told my parents everything, and they weren't impressed, and they, like the most of the people here, were surprised that Eric hadn't joined me. My mother gave me a big hug, took me a bath, and poured me a glass of wine, and all I did was try to relax and forget about my terrible day. I hadn't heard from Eric yet, but I texted him to let him know I arrived home safely and would see him tomorrow. Eric texted me back around 9 p.m., wondering if I meant home, or the Airbnb we had reserved near the concert. I clarified, and he answered, "Okay, I'll see you tomorrow. Love you so much." I had no idea what to make of it because the entire day had been a complete disaster. So I drank my wine, watched a Disney movie, and then went to bed. Given that I had yet to hear from Eric, I believed he would arrive about lunchtime. So I woke up early and began wrapping Christmas presents. At 8 a.m., I heard a key in the door, and what do you know, it was Eric, still in his wrinkle suit, red eyes, and looking like death. He wasn't making much sense, so I made him take a shower and warm up, made coffee, and decided to talk when he looked human again. We sat down and cobbled together his version of the story. Once I had left, Eric was furious with Marie. He had frozen like a deer in headlights when she asked me to go and was kicking himself for not doing the right thing. About 10 minutes after I left, Marie turned around and said, "Oh, a few people haven't shown up. Get Vicky to return. We have space for her now." And Eric had attempted to call me. He couldn't get through because there was no phone coverage anywhere around the site, and Marie quickly remarked, "Oh, well, never mind, she didn't want to be here anyway," which was plainly a piece of trash and made Eric feel terrible. The supper was a formal, sit-down event, so he just smirked and bore it, figuring I'd return later in the evening. Eric was the only person named in the speeches by Marie's father who was not a family member, and everyone seemed to know how disappointed he was that I wasn't there to experience it with him. I texted him at 6 p.m. to let him know I was going home, but he never received it. He was only able to text me at 9 p.m. after hiking down the road for 5 minutes to find a signal. All the while, his ex Helen was being sickening nice, asking where I was, why I didn't want to come and enjoy the party, and whether I was shy. She appeared to have an evil sparkle in her eye, as if she had achieved her goal. We had no idea she was the maid of honor until we arrived, and considering their strained relationship, Eric was furious that Marie had forgotten to mention her major part in the ceremony. I'm not sure whether Helen was responsible for the seating issue, but if she was, Marie was just as terrible for allowing it to happen. So Eric suffered through the ceremony and returned to the Airbnb alone. He barely slept, angry at Marie and Helen for fucking with us and at himself for not standing up for me, and left at 4:30 a.m. to catch the first train home, which is why he returned to our place so early. He didn't apologize to me at all, and he didn't seem to understand how bad it was for me. He felt more humiliated by the scenario and disappointed by his oldest friend. He's cutting off Marie and doesn't want anything else to do with her. So yes, that was Eric's opinion on the whole situation. To be honest, I was annoyed that he hadn't taken into account how I felt or what it was like to be kicked out of the wedding. While his experience had been unpleasant, he had been kept warm, dry, and well-nourished. The outrage of your girlfriend being taken from an event you're attending isn't nearly as horrible as being the girlfriend, getting soaked in the rain, feeling embarrassed, and so on, so we spoke. And I explained why I was upset about what had transpired, as well as why his behavior was inappropriate. He can be a bit of a lemon at times, and this appears to be one of those instances where he did not step up to the plate, instead allowing the world to wash over him and acting as a bystander. I'm still saddened by his behavior, and he hasn't fully apologized. I'm not sure if he knows what he did wrong. However, this is not a deal breaker for me. It's a heavy straw on the camel's back, but the camel remains standing. We have a wonderful Christmas coming up, and after a long autumn of hard work, all I want is to return to the pleasant place we were before this fuck up, and I honestly don't want to think about it anymore. So, I know many of you will drag me over hot coals for this one, but we're still together. I'm not going to break up with him because of this, but it's a major black point on his record. As far as I'm concerned, he needs a lot of extra credit to pass this year, to use a bad analogy, and I want him to step up and try harder from now on. It's not actually an ultimatum, but I'm willing to put this behind us if he can show me that he's committed to working better in our relationship from now on. If he doesn't, I'll leave. I adore him, but he must support me and understand what I'm going through. I apologize that this wasn't the triumphant breakup news that many of you were hoping for, but I want us to have a great Christmas together. I am not ruling anything out if things do not improve, but I want to give him another chance to prove that our relationship is worthwhile. TLDR, Eric came home the next day. Did we talk? We are still together. Top comment. Throw the underscore switch. Things to ponder about. If Marie said you may stay only 10 minutes after you left, why didn't he come and locate you after his call failed? If Marie said you may stay only 10 minutes after you left, why didn't he go? Locate a signal to contact you 5 minutes later, after his call failed? Why didn't he try to find a signal to call you again, even though you were just 5 minutes away and it was 9 p.m.? Relevant comments. It is all mine now. So I know a lot of you will drag me over hot coals for this one, but we're still together. Yes, that is the most crucial thing. You have not lost him. And as for dragging you over coals, you're going to be the one who has to live with this selfish, conceited carpet, so there's nothing else I can say that would make the point more clear than some more instances where he just dumps you on the side of the road because he's offended by how they disrespected him by treating you poorly. Throw the switch makes an excellent point. He didn't even try to catch you up, go down the road to contact you, or depart in disgust. He couldn't stop thinking about his own injured sentiments. You have a wonderful life ahead of you. Oop. I've set a timetable in my head for major progress in a few areas of the relationship, which I've told him is critical if he wants to keep us together, and if that doesn't happen, I'm leaving. If he makes a significant mistake before then, I'll leave. Just giving him one more chance to pull himself up by his bootstraps and show it's worth remaining for. Please do so and click the notification bell to remain updated on more disturbing real-life tales happening around you.